Welcome everybody to a Dwelling of Duels stream thing here. This is indeed vocal coaching with Catagen. Well, not exactly vocal coaching. I'm not here to tell anybody how to do vocals. I'm just here tonight to tell you like the engineering aspect of what you should look out for when you're recording vocals, what you should be doing with editing your vocals, and some tips and stuff for mixing your vocals. So this isn't a course on how to sing good. There's plenty of other stuff out there. This is specifically some stuff about recording, mixing, and editing your vocals. I hope everybody can hear me all right. I think we're good. Let me go ahead and make sure that you guys can all hear and see my Reaper session that I've got here. Oh boy. So I've got a Reaper session here.
Got a porcelain doll, gonna scratch new skin.
Okay, looks like that's coming through. Can everybody hear that all right? I'm hoping that's good. This is similar to when I did the stream of like a month ago or something, when I did like just a general mix. This is a library that I found on the Mixing Secrets multi-track library thing. This is a track called, I don't even remember what it's called. It's called something like Booty Shake or something like that. It's by a band called Moose Music. And I picked this one because it's got a pretty good like sound to it, a pretty good like alt rock kind of sound. It's got vocals in here. We even have like backing vocals that we can deal with. So we got a lot of cool stuff to do with this track. This is just like this is the full multi-track, so it's not totally mixed. These are raw everything, raw instruments, raw vocals, all that stuff. So that's going to be a lot of fun to mess around with. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about recording your vocals. The vocals in this track are very well recorded. There's no, in the sense that there's no popping, like there's no clipping. There's some like plosives you can hear in this track, and we'll talk about that in a bit. If anybody has any questions you want to throw in the chat, go ahead and do that. I will try to keep an eye out for them. So one of the things when you're recording vocals that you really want to watch out for, of course, just like any other instrument, clipping. You don't want to clip. If your input's too high and you're clipping either at your interface level or within Reaper, it's more acceptable. If you're clipping at your interface, obviously you're going to have some artifacts and some nasty sounds. So you want to take care of your gain staging pretty well with your mic. Make sure that, you know, do a test run through with whatever you're going to record with. Sing like not necessarily the loudest part of your song, but something that has a lot of energy to it, like a lot of air that you're pushing, because that's usually what's going to drive your microphone the most and could potentially clip. Like the loudest parts of your song is a good place to start, but also anything that's energetic. Like if for some reason you're doing maybe you're whistling or something, maybe you should test that out too, because you're blowing onto your mic and that could cause a lot of like peaks and clips and stuff. You can do some clipping repair afterwards. If you have something like Isotope RX or something, you can remove clips, but generally it's better to just have it fixed as early on. You're going to want to pare down any kind of noise in your recording space. For like for instance, I have like an AC unit that's behind me right now, which to me it sound like it blends into the room, but really you're really going to hear that kind of thing. Just like recording any kind of acoustic instrument, you're gonna really want to reduce that noise, because especially with vocals, you're gonna find when we go into the mixing stage, we're gonna compress the fuck out of these vocals in order to get them to really pop over the mix. I should say we're mostly going to be working with vocals from like a pop or rock sense of production, where you want your vocals to be the clearest thing in your mix. Some people are like, sometimes if you're doing a mix that's more like, if you're doing an a cappella arrangement, we're going to do some things a little bit differently compared to that. If you're doing a mix where like vocals are being used as more of like a pad sound, like a choir sound to add flavor to a track, you're going to mix your vocals a little bit differently, but we'll talk about that when we get to the mixing part. If you only have a microphone that's like a USB microphone or something like that, that can work. It's not ideal. You can get some pretty decent quality USB microphones, but like you're gonna want to try to use an XLR microphone with a dedicated interface. Right now, the microphone that I'm using here is I don't even know what this is. It's a Rockville RCM03. It's like this baby bottle. Oh God. It's like this baby bottle style mic that I got for free when I purchased my interface. I really don't know what it is. But this is the mic that I've been using for this stuff here. However, when I'm normally recording things, I have an SM57 that I go with, just because it's a really solid dynamic mic. Picks up a lot of things. It's like tried and true. But you know, if you've got some kind of other mic that you're really familiar with, some other vocal mic, things like that, those are always good to go with. If you're using something like a who the heck is out here spamming my channel? Mods, please ban. Thank you. Distracted. What was I saying? If you have a mic that's like a condenser mic, you want, and really with any mic, you want to make sure that you have like a windscreen or a pop filter on them, just because it'll really help you catch any kind of accidental plosives that will go on by when you're recording. If you have a windscreen, I don't think you necessarily need a pop filter as well. Like, I think having both is overkill, but it could totally work either way. With condenser mics, I was told by Darmok actually earlier today that condenser mics can get ruined if you get them wet, which is why you want the windscreen or pop filter on them to like collect your spittle and all that stuff, so you don't destroy your microphone. So keep that in mind. I don't have any condenser mics myself, so I've never had to deal with that, but keep that in mind. As far as recording goes, those are really the only tips I can give you. I would say you also want to make sure that your position is consistent. Like, if you're recording vocals, try as best you can to keep the sound that's going into the microphone consistent. So like, don't be moving your microphone around the room too much, unless that's an effect you want to go for. But if that's the case, clearly delineate, like, you know, record like position A on one track and record position B on another track. Oh, Demon Stray says, using a windscreen is okay without a pop filter, but it's usually advised stay at least the same distance away from the mic as a pop filter would be. Good tip. Very good. Position the windscreen at the distance pop filter at the distance you want. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, your microphone can tend to pick up a lot of like room sounds as well, and like the shape of whatever you're doing. So be consistent with that. Be consistent with your level. If you find you're clipping, turn it down, obviously, but like, you want to get all that stuff figured out beforehand, because there's you can have some big issues when you try to, like, if you have like your normal audio is peaking here and then you have one section where it drops down to here, right? When you do compression and all that stuff, it's going to be kind of annoying to deal with. And that goes for recording anything, really. Like, you want to be consistent with your levels. Oh, hey, what's up, Josh from Bonus Stage Van? Yeah, T-Rer, that's a good point. Put your windscreen pop filter. I'm doing the same thing you did. Put your pop filter wherever you want, and then, you know, use that as your marker. That's a good tip. Good tip. I haven't recorded vocals in a while. truthfully. So I'm not the one to really give tips for recording, but those are my general audio recording tips there. When you are, so let's talk about editing your vocals. When you are recording in Reaper does this awesome thing where you can do take lanes. And I'm sure most of you out there who are familiar with Reaper know all about this feature where you can, record multiple times over the same spot, and it will basically like slice it up and give you multiple take lanes of stuff. I'm going to give you guys an example here just real quick. I'm going to, will this work if I'm already using it in OBS? Oh, I don't want to monitor my vocals. So I'm going to record a take here, blah, blah, blah. Then, of course, I'm going to save that. And then if I go and I record it again, we're going to record over it. But then once I'm done and I finish recording, we get this nice little take lane. And so I can use this to do multiple takes of the same thing. You can go in and use the S key to split things, and you can do different bits here. This is all pretty basic recording stuff for Reaper. I've seen some people that don't know that how take lanes work or what they're used for, but it is specifically so that you can do multiple takes through a track or through a section of a song and use that to construct the ideal version of your song. And with recording vocals, that's a very common thing to do. Like, pop songs could be made up of 6 or 7 takes of the main hook, and you're literally switching on like every single syllable or something like that. So those are really handy to do. In Reaper, there's also this feature called comps that you can save. This is something I think a lot less people know about. So if you were to like highlight this collection of takes and the different take lanes that I've selected, you right click and you go under comps, which is right below the take option here. You can go under comps and hit save as new comp, give it a name like vocals 1 maybe. Boom, you can do that. Then now if I highlight this stuff again later on, I can easily swap to that comp. So maybe there's a different comp that I've figured out that has totally different takes on it. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I can go under comps, save as new comp, vocals 2. So now whenever I come in here and I highlight all this, I go under comps, I can easily switch vocals 1, vocals 2, and you can get you can kind of A/B different types of sounds you want. That's pretty handy. I've actually really used comps only with drum recording. I've never actually used it with vocals, but it is there and it's pretty common for what you're going to do. And then of course you have options like removing the active comp from the list, cropping to the active comp, moving it to the top lane, things like that. Pretty handy. I use it for, like I said, drum mixes and drum edits and things like that. It's pretty good. Yeah, comps is a pretty neat little thing that you can do. With editing, like I said, I tend to edit like down to the syllable sometimes, or even the word, and then I'll like do a lot of manual like moving things around, whether it's within the item itself or within the whole project. It's kind of a tough thing to explain. Yeah, Josh, I've done comps. Like if I'm doing multiple takes through of recording drums, I'll use the comps on multiple lanes. It gets a little complicated when you do it with live drums, but you can group multiple tracks. Let me give you an example. This is totally a tangent right now, but I'm going to show you anyways. So like say this is drums 1 and this is drums 2, like 2 different mics, right? I have something that I'm recording. Oops. Get rid of that. Put the right mic on. There's something that I'm recording on microphone 1 and microphone 2, blah, 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 blah. And then say I do another take here, blah, 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 blah. Actually, what I should have just done is duplicated this. But what you can do, oh yeah, hold on, let me get, let's say that you had 2 mics here and they're recorded from different positions, right? Obviously you can flip between all these and stuff, but say we are doing a drum edit. You can highlight both lanes, hit G to group them, and then now when you flip an individual track, it will flip the whole thing. And I'm pretty sure this will work if I go under comps and flip the comp. Yeah, it flips it for all the microphones, which is really cool. And that's specifically the grouping feature that's allowing you to do that. Anyways, tangent about comping. I hope you guys enjoyed that, because comping is an underused feature in Reaper that I think is very handy. I was talking about editing. This track is already edited. Like, the vocals are just a single lane, and they're pretty good. They're pretty well, like, on beat. This isn't like a recording session. This is the mix session. So they've already done all your editing and stuff. But especially with vocals, I think rhythmic discrepancies are really easy to notice with vocals. Like, for me, I like a really tight vocal. I want it to line up really well with the drums and stuff like that. So I will get really deep into the nitty gritty. I'll like solo the vocals alongside the drums and like spend time, you know, just synchronizing that stuff and syncing it up that way. It's kind of hard to show you that here because I don't have multiple takes that I could show you, like picking each individual one. But basically, like, if you're going for the pop style of production where vocals become, like, as soon as you add vocals to a song like this, it's going to become the main focus for 95% of the population out there. And so you kind of need to spend a lot of time on the vocals. Like, I'll spend a lot of time editing them, and you'll see I'm going to spend a lot of time going through and doing volume automations and things for the mix. And that's just because, like, most of the people out there are going to spend so much time on it that you need to spend a lot of time yourself focusing on it to make it sound really, really good and really, really polished. Yeah, as far as editing goes, I think that's my only real tips for here that are specific to vocals. I feel like a lot of people don't really take advantage of editing in projects like Reaper as much as they should. Like I'm saying, to the point where you're coming in at like really tiny levels and being like, oh, this is like a little bit late, I'm gonna move this over. I like to do it a little bit to make it sound really good and really on beat and stuff like that. Arguably too much of it, obviously, makes the performance a bit more artificial, right? You know, it's like people can say, oh, well, you didn't actually play it that tight. Like, yeah, but if it sounds good, you know, what's the difference? Like, there's been plenty of times that I've seen bands play live, and of course, like, a live band sometimes like never even hits their own level of rhythmic consistency that's on their own album, like with metal and rock bands. So I think there's a bit of leniency and a bit of leeway you can have with editing your tracks in general to make them very, very perfect, right? Because I mean, obviously, if you're doing 6, 12, 20 takes of vocals and then comping those together, like, from the beginning, that whole concept is you know, it's an artificially perfect track. So I feel like that's pretty allowed everywhere, and no one seems to gripe at that. But as soon as you go in and you start tweaking like individual bits of rhythm, then it becomes a problem. I don't know. Just my 2 cents there. Josh says there's a balance between keeping it natural. You got to retake. That's true. Sometimes you do, like, you don't want to get it robotic. You don't want to edit, you know, drums or things to where it sounds like it was just programmed. You do want to have that live feel. And sometimes that can be accomplished by just keeping one thing consistent with how it was recorded and then matching other things up over it. But yeah, sometimes you just want to do a retake and be like, get it a little tighter this time. Anyways, so I feel like most of this presentation here, this lecture that I'm giving, is going to be about mixing and just overall production. So let's go ahead and do some of that. So the vocals here, pretty good. I don't know if they compressed anything on the way in when they were recording it. Let's go ahead and just give a listen to one of these sections here. Just realized I still have the drums on. Big Dummy Shake, that's the name of the song. Big Dummy Shake. So looking at this project here, I can hear some inconsistencies with the volume, like it sounds raw, basically. It's not compressed too much. There's a little bit of compression. I can see very much in the waveform here, like, you know, there's some parts like right about here where it's louder than stuff like this. Little bits here, things are going, like here he says back again, and like I can tell that this is the A syllable right here, and you really can't hear it. You're hearing back again. Like the A is very, very quiet. So like that's something that I know we're going to try to bring up. You want to make your vocals as audible as possible and understandable, because, you know, you want people to hear your vocals. So let's just go ahead and start at the basics with compression. I'm a big fan of all the Reaper standard plugins, as I mentioned on the drum mixing episode, whatever. And so Recomp is my best friend. I think it's really good. I do have a couple other vocal processors that I will use here, and we'll talk about those. So let's just do some compression. We came back before talk. This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night. I do want to see, I'm going to start with one of these presets just to see how they've written it. So like this modern vocal preset, ratio 5.0, 5.2, pretty fast attack and a pretty fast release. And they even have a bit of a high pass in here. That's pretty interesting. I'm not going to use... I'll use most of the settings as is. Of course, you'll want to adjust the threshold yourself. But it's interesting to see how these presets have been written, or, you know, how they have been preset, just to get an idea for like what other people are doing with their vocals. So there's this modern vocal preset. Here's this aggressive vocal preset, which as far as being aggressive, I mean, it doesn't seem that aggressive. It's got a lower ratio. It's got a bit higher of an RMS size, which is going to have it... Oh no, is that the default RMS? What did Modern Vocal have? Modern Vocal had a very small RMS. Let's see how it sounds. This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night. The party at it. We came back before talk. This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night. Yeah, it's pretty modern, I guess. It's doing quite a bit. Let me hear this aggressive vocal. Before talk, this is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night. I think I like the modern vocal more. I'm really listening to like there's this one, I think he does like a plosive sound, which plosives are describe the sound that you make when you say plosive, like that p. That's a plosive sound. B is a plosive sound. It's the ones where you push air out of your mouth. And so even without this compression on, this is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking I can hear some like wind. like that but a joke that he's saying, nothing but a joke. I'm really hearing that trigger this compressor really hard. And you can even see on the gain reduction here, we're hitting it like, it's doing like what?
This is nothing but a joke.
6 or so, and then it hits 8 because of this like big plosive sound that's coming in. And the high pass that's on this compressor will cut a lot of that out, and it'll like ignore it for that. But I might also want to just remove a bit of it before the compressor even gets it.
Nothing but a joke. Nothing but a joke.
Maybe not. I don't really want to remove too much of the low end because we want the vocals to be very full.
Nothing but a joke.
Obviously, we're listening to these vocals isolated, so the context of it within a full mix, we might end up, high passing it pretty high just because there's so much other things going on. We're more worried about like the 5K range for vocals, 3K, 5K, as compared to like everything else. But for now, let's worry about it in its own context because we want it to sound good and clear.
To the party at it, we came back before dark. This is nothing but a joke.
So I think what I might do is increase the attack a bit.
To the party at it, we came back before dark. This is nothing but a joke.
Because it kind of allows more of that plosive to come through without compressing everything too quickly. Because if we have the attack too low, I can hear it squashing like the next syllable. Well, maybe we'd want to change the release there. I don't know. It's tough to like talk this stuff out loud while I'm doing it. I'm not used to doing that. Normally I'm just like, up, down, down, and like it sounds good or it sounds bad, right? And I can react to it that way. It's tough when I'm here trying to tell all of you about this kind of stuff. So bear with me. I'm trying to give my best input.
To the party at it, we came back before dark. This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night.
Sounded pretty good so far. Let's hear it in the mix.
To the party at it, we came back before dark. This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night.
So there's another compressor that I like to use on vocals, and it is called what is it called? Rough Rider 2 by Audio Damage Inc. I think that this one does a good job of like heavily compressing vocals, so we're gonna bypass the recomp and I'm gonna go for like just to show you what it can do, I'm gonna go for the nuclear option preset.
Party at it, we came back before dark. This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night.
And this compresses it so much that like you can even hear the room reflections back after he like stops talking. That's how compressed this is. It's literally a 1,000 to 1 ratio. And I'm sure if I turn it down even more, woo, too loud.
To the party at it, we came back before dark. This is nothing but a joke.
And actually, like, it does a good job of making everything really like pretty solid.
This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night.
It didn't actually turn out that bad. And maybe even if we mix like to put the mix of it pretty low so that we're getting mostly dry and then like this nuclear option blended in a bit.
Party at it, we came back before dark. This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night. Whoa, the rest of the night.
Actually didn't turn out that bad. That turned out better than I thought it would.
We came back before dark. This is nothing but a joke. I've been thinking of the rest of the night. Whoa, the rest of the night.
That's what we call parallel compression when you use that mix knob there. And I was actually thinking about using this nuclear option in a separate track setup for parallel compression, but when you have the built-in mix knob, it's pretty handy. Of course, every Reaper plugin has its own built-in mix knob. This thing right here, 100% wet, 0% wet. Everything has its own built-in mix knob, so you can do this pretty easily, but I think this knob is too small. Like, It's easy to just overlook it and not realize why your plugin is acting weird, and it's because Reaper's got its wet dry mix set. I feel like when it's obviously in the plugin interface, it's a bit easier to deal with, but you know, that's just me. Compression. All right, so the next thing I would tend to do, I'm kind of working through this a bit quicker. Like, obviously I'm not listening to the whole thing. We want to get a good pass on the vocals in general. Let's imagine that the sound of the rest of this mix is what we want, and we'll tweak the vocals to fit within this mix that already exists, just in the interest of time, so I'm not doing a full mix and then, you know, trying to do it all. We're gonna pretend everything is fine the way it is, and then just make room for the vocals. So with a lot of vocals, the main thing you're looking for is your vocal clarity, like, and that tends to be around the 3K and the 5K range, just about. You can hear when I like cut around that area, I'm cutting right in the middle at like 3.5. It sounds really buried, like the vocal almost like disappears in a way compared to when I fade it back up. Really helps to make it pop, and that's like a what do they call it, psychoacoustical thing with humans. Like, we have evolved to hear that range of frequencies very well, because that is the range, I think it's typically the range at which people talk. And so that's why sometimes you'll hear really like piercing mixes. They tend to have a lot of buildup in this area, and your ears are very sensitive there. So what we can do to really help the vocals pop there is boost that area on the vocals, and anything that seems to be masking in that range, whether it's guitars or synthesizers or drum kits sometimes, we want to cut in that same range just to like make room for the vocals to sit and to breathe. So, and let's experiment with giving a high shelf too. Let's see how much of that low shelf we can actually fade up before we notice anything as well. We can get to about 200 hertz before we even notice that the vocal is being filtered any. So let's go with that. Ooh, let's, on second thought, I'm going to duplicate this Re-EQ plugin, and I'm going to do the low shelf before the EQ, just because. I'm sorry. I'm going to do the low shelf before the compressor, just because it can help reduce those plosives and stuff that we were dealing with before. So then this EQ will get rid of the low shelf because we've already done that. Like a lot of people, when they talk about mixing, they always say, when they talk about mastering and they talk about loudness, people always say the secret to getting your tracks really loud is to high pass your tracks. And the reason for that is there's a lot of energy in the low frequencies that can kind of build up and that you don't really hear. Like it's there, but you don't really hear it, you don't perceive it because it's such low frequency. It's like the rumble, right? Like anything below, like, what is it, 50 or 60 hertz, you can't really hear. You feel it instead, and so it's really, really powerful frequencies. Because they're so powerful and because they're inaudible, they are the ones that tend to push compressors harder than you would expect. So like with those plosive sounds, you're getting a lot of low frequency rumble from that. And so what this low shelf, or high pass is accomplishing is removing as much of that low rumble as we can so that the compressor doesn't work hard on things we can't hear. Okay, so that's why like Recomp has its own built-in like high pass filter. It's really good. It helps you to like cut out those low frequencies easily without having to have an EQ before it. It'll just low pass it when it gets fed into the compressor itself. So the compressor's like being triggered on a signal with a high pass, but the final result doesn't actually contain that high pass. It's a little hard to explain, but this EQ is totally going to shape the entire sound, and we're removing all the low end from it, whereas the Recomp low pass, or high pass, I'm sorry, I get them all confused. Recomp's high pass is only changing the detector signal and not the overall output. Okay, so things to keep in mind there, but here we actually want that frequency removed. And really, like with this, you could even push it farther. Like if you really wanted to ignore all your low end, you could push your high pass value up to like 900 if you're crazy. Maybe like 500 or 600 would be more reasonable, but you could go pretty high because it won't affect the actual frequency output of the compressor, just the level at which it compresses. So you can push those pretty high. And to give an example of it, like let's turn these EQs off and I'll come back into Recomp just to show you what I'm talking about with this specific compressor. This is kind of turning into a compressor tutorial as well. So when you change these values, so we had 8008 for the low pass, and then we'll set this really weird for the high pass. There's this button over here underneath your output mix, and it's called Preview Filter. And what that's going to do is apply this filter to the output of your track. So it sounds really old-timey, really radio. That's obviously not what we want the final thing to sound like, but it gives you an example of this signal that you're hearing is what the compressor is acting on when you have this low pass and high pass set. So if you think about it, like normally if these were all set to nothing, the compressor acts on whatever you're hearing, and whatever's going in is what's going to trigger the threshold values and the compression itself. When you tweak these EQ settings, I'm going to play this, and then as I do that, I'm going to increase the high pass. And if you keep an eye here on this threshold meter, you'll see the overall volume of it. The overall volume, thanks Tiber. As I increase this high pass setting, the overall volume you're going to see here on this threshold meter is going to drop because we're filtering the input to the compressor. So here we go.
Gonna pay the old bills, gonna have a good time, reminisce about the better ones. Friend, gonna pay the old bills, gonna have a...
And of course, if I put the low pass and the high pass like overlapping, it's gonna do some wacky shit anyways. So now if I go in here and preview filter, it sounds weird. It sounds really weird. I hope this is getting out. I feel like I've lost the point that I was trying to make here, but I'm glad you guys are enjoying my compressor tutorials. Basically, like, tweaking these inputs won't affect your output, but you can listen to what the compressor is hearing by hitting preview filter and then seeing what happens. So, a diagram would be great, actually, for this. I wonder if I have like do I have like paint? Can I open paint? Oh, I have paint. There's like a very specific concept that I want to get across right here. So, I'm glad you're enjoying this, Ian. Happy to see you here. Let's go with this. So, let's say you have a signal chain, and your signal chain is starting from the top. So you have a vocal that comes in, right? This is going to be a microphone. I hope it doesn't look like anything bad. Well, that's okay. That's your microphone input. No, you know what? Sound waves, whatever. Your microphone comes in, right? It's going to hit this compressor box, so to speak. And so what's going to happen, this is your ooh, there's a plosive. Your signal's going to get taken in, and the compressor has like detector circuitry in it. In a real compressor anyways. It has like detector. It's got detector circuitry. And so what's going to happen is your incoming signal is going to get duplicated. So there's one that goes out. Oh, you know, we're going to need that to be shorter. There's one that goes this way, and then it goes, hello, I'm going this way. And so this part goes into the detector circuitry as well. This is where all of the math happens with like your threshold and your ratio and attack and release and all that. That's over here inside of this detector circuitry, so to speak. I'm gonna need more room. So your detector gets this signal and basically decides it sends out its own signal, which might not be an audio signal, but it says, hey, lower the volume by 6 dB, right? By 6 dB. That's going to happen there. And then this signal on a normal compressor will act on this signal. So this says like, hey, lower the volume by 6 dB. And so, okay, now this is 6 dB lower. Okay, so we've basically had this signal was still coming through and was still saying like, this is your original raw signal that's going in, getting going straight through. The detector circuitry is saying, oh, the threshold is at this value, ratios at this value, this is where our actual input is, lower the volume by 6 decibels, and then your original signal gets lowered by 6 decibels. So inside of the detector, before it even hits that detector, is where the EQ can exist. So like right here, we'll have another little box that says, beep. Oh, come on. Brush. Beep, 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 beep. There's your EQ right there. And so it's not being applied to the final output, right? Because that output is still going directly through here, but that EQ is going right before the detector circuitry, which lets it lets you kind of shape the way that the EQ or that the compression happens, whether or not it's going to act on those really low end frequencies that take up a lot of energy, or whether it's going to let them slide by and only focus on, you know, maybe something like the really spiky 3K, 5K area. And then, yeah, you get your final output. When in Reaper, when we use that preview filter option, it's going to route this signal here, like the actual signal you hear, is also being routed through that EQ, just so you can preview it. It's not meant to be like an actual filter. It's just so you can hear, you're basically like tapping into this EQ box and seeing like, oh, what is this EQ setting that I have sound like to the detector circuitry? Like, what's it going to sound like? Yeah, hope that makes sense. That's a little bit about EQs and stuff for certain compressors. Other compressors sometimes have similar options like that. Like for instance, there is a T-Rax plugin that I use sometimes called White Channel. It's a channel strip plugin. I'll load it up right here. Oh, I got this in a bundle like a couple of years ago. It's cool, but I haven't used it as much as I want to. Looks a little complicated, but it has its own EQ here. It has a low, low mid, and high. You can set all these things. B, easy peasy. Then down at the bottom, there's like this gate expander and compression settings. There's a nice little button here that says EQ pre. And basically all that does is, or maybe it's EQ sidechain. No, I think it's EQ pre. I don't know, this is a bad example. I don't actually remember how to use this plugin. There's some setting in here where I can set the EQ to happen before the compressor, and that'll tweak the overall, compression threshold, or the gain reduction that comes out of the compressor. So, all that said, we're gonna high pass before the compressor to do both things. We want to remove all that low end data, and also we can get away with shaping the overall sound of the EQ of the vocals here by removing a lot of the low end data. Yes, Ian, I think you're right. I think it would be EQ pre. I think the EQ sidechain, you can have like sidechains set up, and that would apply the EQ to the sidechain before it hits your compressor. I don't think we're gonna need to talk about sidechain compression with vocals here. We could. It's 8:48. We could definitely do that. Anyways, let's give this thing a listen. So the next thing I want to talk about here, while I've got time, is automation writing. So I'm really particular about, like, compressors can do a lot of good for getting you to a good baseline on what your finished track is going to sound like, this specific vocal line. But I think, and a lot of pro mixers will agree, because vocals are so important, you want to give them more detail. You need to give the compressor a little bit of extra help after the fact. So if your normal signal is really wavy, your compressor will help level that out, especially if you use the nuclear option like we just did. But there still are certain times where certain syllables, because of whatever the compressor is doing, it needs a little bit of help, right? It needs a little bit of extra oomph to get certain syllables and things out of the way. So let's go ahead and listen to this section here. Those backing vocals are very loud. Let's bring those down a bit. So I'm just going to focus on the spot between these two things here. So I'm looking at this waveform. Obviously, we can't entirely base our mixing and editing mindset on waveforms. A lot of people say use your ears, not your eyes. I think eyes can be very helpful still, but let's give it a listen, and we're going to listen for any kind of vocal syllables or something that seem to be getting lost, that aren't coming through as clear as we want. Alright, so right in this very first line, because this is so serious, I can hear that so really loud, it's really clear, but I kind of want the first part of that line to be even louder. So over here, I've gone to the automation on trim here on the track. I've enabled trim volume. You can do the regular volume envelope, but I always use trim volume because it works separately from your fader. If you automate the volume, it'll just automate your fader. Automating your trim volume still allows you to raise your fader up and down when you're working on your track. I just find it easier. So I'm The most important thing to do here for anybody that's doing any kind of stuff in Reaper is learn your shortcuts. Shortcuts are like the most important thing. So like I know the shortcuts for like snapping, like turning snap on and off, which is Alt S. I will turn those on and off all the time whenever I'm working and stuff. The shortcuts for adding a envelope point when you're hovering over it, if you hold shift, you can insert an envelope point wherever you're pointing, obviously following snap. So if I have snap turned on, I do it there, it's gonna snap. But learning these shortcuts and learning how to do stuff very quickly is gonna speed up your workflow so much. So here, I know this is like a breath. I don't really care about that, but I know right here, because this is so I know for sure I'm gonna want to grab right here and just like crank this volume up. Maybe not that much, but we'll tweak it a bit. It's a little bit too loud. I kind of want to bring this up, maybe bring it down a little bit. That helps. You know, all we've done is bring the whole thing up by about 3.5 dB, just to really help balance that out. And this is the kind of thing that I would do for the entire track. I'm gonna like listen over and over again and just make sure. I'm just gonna make sure that I can hear everything that's going on. And you kind of want to be like constantly referencing other parts of the song to make sure you're balancing it. Some parts I want louder than others. Why so serious? Guess the movie. And sometimes, like when I'm listening to this line here, it ain't right. There's a bit of, in any kind of language, whenever you're talking, we skip syllables and things like that. And so I feel like one of the most important things with vocal stuff is to try to like pretend that those syllables are still there, those certain sounds that make up words are still there, and like boost them in certain cases. So like just by boosting this like a couple dB, I'm kind of bringing out like the duh in it ain't right, which kind of makes it a bit more audible. And here's another one, right? Like the T at the end of right, you can't hear because he's like, the singer is kind of not slurring it, but like omitting it. Like they're glossing over it, but it's still there in a way. Maybe a bit too much. Oh, it's actually getting like mixed into the next word. That's a tough one to really bring out, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. And you might find when you're working on this that like as you're tweaking all this, if you're constantly going back and like referencing the volume of each section, you might find you have to do multiple passes. Like I'm gonna do this section here, and then we'll go back and listen to the whole thing, or this section, and compare and make sure we're getting a consistent sound. So here I'm going to try to get like a G sound a bit. Oh, another really good shortcut is Shift lets you put in points, obviously, but if you hold Control, you can freehand draw an envelope, which can be really good if you know there's like a swell that someone's doing, like they're getting louder, or you want them to get louder, or you want them to be quieter over time. It can be really good to know how to do like the freehand draw, as well as putting in single points. Like for here, like it might be more suitable to do a freehand. That might be too much. Just a little bit. kind of want the B to be a bit louder. Also, you need to be careful with trim volume because the default range of it is like plus 12 dB. So if you go all the way up, you're adding a lot to it. If you want to be very, very minute, like if you're going between like 2 or 3 dB, I think you can actually change a setting. I think there's a preference setting that lets you set how detailed your FX or your trim volume automation block is, but I'm not sure. I don't actually remember. Let's look. Trim, find. Ooh, no. We're getting close. Trim content, no. No. Okay, we've looped. I don't know where it is. Somewhere there's a setting. Maybe if you right click on the automation item envelopes. No, I'm not sure. There's some setting somewhere where you can change the range that it goes, but it's all right. So like dummy shake, I want to make that a bit louder, especially the shake part. And you see this little syllable right here? That's like the K at the end of shake. Oh, I definitely want that up. A lot of this, like the part where using your eyes can really help is being able to see the transients of where certain sounds and things are, and being able to be like, oh, I know that this is, two or three words in a row, and I can tell like immediately. Like you can just zone in and be like, the K at the end of shake is right there. I can see it. Bring that up a bit. And like, this vocal, like the breath sound of him breathing, it's very loud because of what we're doing with the compressor. So like, we kind of might want to trim that back 10 dB or something just to make it a bit more usable. Because like breath sounds make it real, but you don't want it to be like, you don't want it to be ridiculously loud or anything like that. And like I can tell this is probably gonna need a bit of help too. Again, like we can't rely too much on the shape, on the amplitude of the waveform of how it actually sounds, because the waveform is pre-effects, but we're hearing post-effects. Now we could print the EQ and compression to a new track, and then we would be able to view it post-effects, but I don't really want to do that right now. I don't tend to do much printing of effects. I like to have them able to be changed. I want to bring up that. And like here he kind of trails off a bit. Ooh, that sound right there. I want that louder. But like this sound here, like can you hear? Don't really want that. Don't really want that sound. But I want that like hum back again. I want that sound, but I don't want the of whatever that is. And like here, I think God, it's so. Ian says, is there any benefit to printing effect other than reduction in CPU usage? The example I just said, where you can see the actual waveform, would be one. CPU usage for sure. If you print an effect, then you can like move it around. The only other time that I've printed effects is like if I was working on there's an effect I use in that I've used a couple times before, where I'll like do a reverse reverb swell, meaning like I'll take a track, send it to a reverb that's set to 100% wet, render that reverb, and like print the effect, and then what do I do? No, I like reverse the vocal track, send it to a reverb, print the reverb, print it to the track, reverse that item, and then if you put that, like, if you time it right, it sounds like a reverb swell that leads into something. That's the only time that I've really printed effects. I think it is good practice once you're done with a mix to freeze your tracks or print the tracks. If you're rendering stems, of course, because, you know, musical projects, eventually, like, if you try to open them many years from now and, like, you don't have the same plugins, or, like, there's something wrong with XYZ, right? Like, you won't be able to recreate the exact same project you had, but if you print the effects, you don't have to worry about it. The trade-off is, of course, you can't edit those effects when they're printed. In Reaper, when you freeze effects, or when you freeze a track, it does save the original track effects and settings and things like that, but it also prints them. So, you know, could be pretty handy. But yeah, generally I hear people doing freezing or printing specifically to reduce CPU usage and stuff. Oh, here's another one I kind of want to. I'm gonna draw this one in. That's too much. Back again. Yeah, I think. So let's give that a listen. This was just a first pass, rough pass. Kind of want to bring that sound up a bit. And that up a bit. Now, I've already noticed something. This is something I tend to do a lot when I do these kind of really, really minute edits, is like listening to this big note here and comparing it to something here. Like, this stuff is louder. So that's something I can already tell, like, this whole section kind of needs to be brought up. Here's another awesome trick with automation that you can do. If you do a time selection up in the ruler, so, like, say I want to do a time selection of just this area. If you do a time selection like this, and you go over here on the left to the automation fader thing, and you grab this, you can raise the entire time selection that you've picked, like, as a group, basically. Mind blown when I first learned about that. It's super helpful for being able to be like, I need to make this whole section slightly louder. And I think I made it a bit too loud, but... And I kind of want to do the same thing here a little bit, so let's do that again. And it will automatically create points if you put your thing in, like, a weird spot. I think this is something I've never actually done, but so here there's like 3 points here. I think you can reduce the number of points somehow in your selection. 13 points apparently. So I'm going to highlight them all with right click on them, reduce number of points, and then selected points. There we go. No, that just does that. I don't really want that. It would be good if I was doing something like tweaking this. I could, you know, go here, reduce number of points, selected points, and then, you know, clean that up a bit, make it a bit more easy to use, but it kind of just alternates and then gets rid of a lot of them as well. So, but that's also a very handy thing to know about. Let's give it one more listen. All right. Sounds pretty good. I think it's a bit over compressed. The nuclear option might be doing a little bit too much. So in some ways I might want to dial back this mix more and still keep that really compressed sound, but dial it back a bit. Let's give that a listen. This is so serious. It ain't right to your big dumb shit, can put it back again. Oh. this part's too loud.
Again.
Yeah, I think dialing back the nuclear option a little bit, another 25% in the mix knob, helped out a bit with like having it not feel as blown out or anything like that. The next thing I want to talk about is de-essing, which is removing sibilance from vocals, which can be really, really, like when you've done a lot of compression and a lot of EQ, you can tend to get like sibilance, similar to plosives. The sibilance is in the name, and it sounds like all the sounds you make to attract wild cats to your door are sibilants. And de-essers will help to remove that sibilance from any kind of project you have. And really, all that a de-esser usually is a multiband compressor. That's just focusing on wherever those sibilance frequencies are. So Reaper has its own built-in multiband compressor, which is Re-X Comp. And so if you go under the presets, there is an option for female DS and male DS, and they say to change the band to frequencies for your singer. This is usually my go-to default because it does work very well. But like any other preset for a compressor, you need to tweak it a bit. So let's find a good section. I'm going to bypass it for now. Let's find a good section of the song where there's lots of sibilance. Actually, I guess this is so serious. This is so serious has a lot of sibilance to it. Now, this recording isn't too bad as far as sibilance goes. Like, it's not ear piercing, but it could. We're gonna tame it just for the purposes of demonstration. So yeah, let's got our re-comp on. We got this thing going. It doesn't sound like it's doing much right now. It's at like the peak of it is at like 7K. We're gonna dial this back a bit just to see. With Re-X Comp, you can see the gain reduction. The gain reduction is the yellow bar. The overall signal is the green bar. And of course, the number is how many dB it's being reduced for the individual band. So if I was to go over here to like this lower band, and we set the threshold, down to here, and the ratio up a bit, you'll see, it's doing compression. You can see I think the interface for this is so good. You can see the ratio as it turns over the knob for whatever you're adjusting. You can see the gain reduction with the yellow bar. You can see the overall waveform. It's great. I love it. So let's reset this bad boy here, because we don't need it. We're only really worrying about this. And similar to something, similar to the way that regular recomp has its own built-in high-pass, low-pass frequencies, we can take a peek at the individual band frequencies here in Re-X Comp. So if you hit solo current band down here, we'll be able to just tap into that one little band frequency we're listening at. And so this is really good for finding what frequencies you need to work on with sibilance and stuff. So we can just solo this band and just tweak the edges of it until we find the most harsh part of our singer. That sounds pretty sibilant. So I think I want to get the threshold to be about where those sounds are coming through. you can actually see right here in this band when on like the first phrase, like because this is so serious, where he's saying that like this band, the frequencies here are really high, but then later on in this phrase, when he's not doing as many sibilant sounds, you can see like the energy in the section drop. So we want to get our threshold to trigger at the point where it's a lot of sibilance going on in this section, and we're just going to set our ratio really high to like catch that.
This is so serious, it ain't right to your big time and shit can pull it back again.
It's a bit of a balancing act, just like any kind of compression, so.
This is so serious, it ain't right to your big time and shit can pull it back again. Oh, I'm back again. This is so. This is so.
Narrow this a little bit.
This is so serious. It ain't right to your big time and shit can pull it back again. Oh.
Let's tweak this attack some.
This is so serious. It ain't right to you.
Okay, now let's listen to it without soloing the band.
This is so serious. This is so serious.
Bypassing it and listening to it.
This is so serious. It ain't right.
Like I said, the sibilance on this track isn't too bad, so it's kind of hard to give an example of it like being really, really obvious when it's being fixed. But if it was really, really bad, then of course we could come in and use re-EQ to cut it out. I guess what I could do maybe is like just give a obnoxious boost here and see what that sounds like, and then we can try to tame that.
This is so.
Yeah, this is very sibilant, right?
This is so serious. It ain't right to your big time and shit can pull it back again. Oh, this is so serious.
Yeah, that's ouch. So let's try taming that a bit, just for fun.
This is so serious. It ain't right to your big time. This is so. This is so serious.
Oh, no, auto makeup gain is turned off. A lot of times in this specific, in recomp, a lot of times this auto makeup gain box is checked a lot whenever you work on something. And so for an instant there, I thought it was like automatically applying gain to the volume, which we don't want in this case. We want to just like compress it and lower it, but that's not the case. It's not actually doing that. So sorry for my freak out. Let's solo this band and listen.
This is so serious. It ain't right to your big time shit. This is so. This is so serious. It ain't right to your big time and shit can pull it back again. This is so. This is so.
We're gonna lower this threshold even more.
This is so.
And really what I should be looking at here is less about specifically where this threshold value is set in relation to the waveform behind it, but really about what sounds are causing gain reduction, because we want to make sure that like the gain's being reduced on sibilant sounds and not so much on the other sounds. If it's reducing not enough on the sibilant sounds, we got to turn the threshold down, no matter what it looks like.
This is so serious. It ain't right to your big time and shit can pull it back again. Oh, this is so. This is so. This is so.
Because this is Soho. That's what he's saying. He's saying we're in Soho.
This is so.
This is a tough one to do.
This is so serious. This is so serious. This is so serious. This is so.
We've definitely tamed it a bit, but obviously, you know, we purposefully inflated it to be a lot more, so that might be about as much as we want to do to it anyways. And, you know, it might even just be better if you're doing a regular EQ just to cut at that point and be like, there's too much sibilance overall in this entire recording, let's cut it out and then, you know, be done with your day there. Yeah, I think the last thing,
This is so serious.
like, you want your vocals to be really clear in a mix. I already mentioned the stuff about the range of human hearing, like where it's most sensitive. That is, like I said, tends to be where vocals hit. And also, like, babies crying tend to really be in that very, very sensitive area because of that, like, evolutionary psychoacoustic thing. So, yeah, keep those in mind. When you're doing things with, like, backing vocals, we haven't really touched on the backing vocals at all, but let's give this a little look, because it's only, like, 2 words. My tip is just compress the whole group. In this case, so I'm going to add a compressor on here. Just to kind of glue it together. It doesn't really do much extra. Like, it'll help the overall sound. I don't know. I don't have much tips for the backing vocal stuff here. They're too loud, that's for sure. You want to make sure, like, obviously they're there to support. They are there to back the vocals, to support the main lead vocals. So you don't want them to, like, blow out anything. You don't want them to be too loud. And yeah, that's what you really need for backing vocals. If you really want to hit home with a vocal thing you're recording, doubling some vocal lines can really help to sell the line you're trying to put out. So it's like double tracking guitars. You're going to double track your vocals. It gives a bit of a chorusy effect to it without you having to, but it's more realistic than a chorus effect. That's from, like, a recording's point of view of arrangement and production, to thicken things up a bit. What else would be good? This is, like, outside of the realm of mixing at this point. I'm talking purely from, like, producer standpoint. Vocal harmonies, if you can nail them pretty well, really good. If you're using, if your backing vocals are providing harmonies, take some time to, like, learn how to use Retune. Retune has a built-in manual pitch correction thing that you can use, which is pretty interesting for, like, writing out a MIDI line and then pitch correcting to it. I do think their interface is a little bit clunky. Like, you can't just use MIDI on it. You have to draw it all in, which is kind of meh. You could use something like Melodyne to correct your backing vocals. If you do, just use Retune and have it set on, like, automatic pitch correction and just set whatever your scale is. It's pretty good at that. Experiment with the attack time of the pitch correction. And do some tests with that. No one's gonna really, if you're doing pitch correction on your backing vocals, which you're doing harmonies and stuff, no one's really gonna say anything. They probably, like, hopefully you won't notice it. Like, there's albums I've listened to that, like, just the other day I was listening to a Green Day album, and, like, Green Day's stuff from, like, American Idiot onwards, and even some of their older stuff, the backing vocals on those and, like, harmonies and things like that are in there, I never noticed them when I was a kid, but, like, listening to them now, they're, like, very, very good, and they add a lot to the songs. So putting some harmonies and things in there is is a good way to make your vocal track stand out some and get extra good. Any other questions for y'all in the chat? I can think about some more ways to slick up your vocals. Reverb, I would say don't do it. If you're going to do a reverb on your vocals, do one that's, like, very, very short. Don't, like, drown your vocals in reverb, specifically because, you know, reverb helps to put things into a space, and whether that, and reverb almost never helps you there was something Ailshon said a long time ago that was like, reverb doesn't help you to make anything louder. All it does is like bury things in a mix, and that's, I think, very true. So like if I put a bunch of reverb on this guy's vocals, just all of a sudden it just doesn't really help bring it out in any way. If anything, it's just making the entire mix muddier. Now, if you use it for like an artistic effect, that's allowed, but I mean, anything's allowed, it's music. But I think you should look into how to duck reverb and other effects like that so that your vocals come out as clear as they can, and then you hear the Tiber says Verbivox crew for life. I think it can be done, but I think it would be better if you did something that's a shorter reverb. Like using a short reverb like this, 287 milliseconds, I think can add a bit of like space to it, meaning like room sound or something like that. But really, like we already noticed on this recording, there is room sound, and if you compress it hard enough, you'll get the actual room sound where it was recorded. So, yeah. But yeah, those kind of things. I wouldn't go crazy long reverbs, because with vocals, with like I said, the pop and rock vocals, you want them to be up front. If there's any reverb, it should probably be a group reverb that everything is being sent to. Like every instrument is going to the same reverb that help it gel together, that kind of thing. Compression, very important with your vocals. Very important. To tell if something's over-compressed, I mentioned over-compression earlier, and I could hear that it was over-compressed, but I'm going to take a minute to explain what that means. Over-compression on vocals, to me, means that you are... Like, I can hear the compressor acting. Meaning, if I have a note that... if there's like a vocal part, like the in this song, like the if the first 10 milliseconds of that was really loud, and then I could hear the compressor like start squashing it, that to me is over compression. If it's like really noticeable, if it's lowering the volume by a ton, then obviously that's over compression. You can certainly like over compress something and nobody will notice. Like in the sense you're applying a lot of compression to it and nobody will notice. That's good. That means you've compressed it well. I think generally when people use the term over compressed, they mean compressed in a way that they can tell it's being compressed. Does that make sense? Because like a good passive compression thing, you will never hear it. I think there's also ways that like some instruments don't need to be compressed a ton. Like if you had solo piano, like you can certainly over compress solo piano and it's just like this extremely loud and rigid kind of thing. But even a solo piano piece would probably want to have some kind of compression on it just to like raise and lower the dynamic volume of the piece that someone's playing. If you were to apply like the kind of compression you use on snare drums to a piano piece, it would probably end up being described as overcompressed because, you know, you're getting an initial transient of a note and then like the whole thing gets squashed. That could certainly be overcompressed, but think about it as also your goal is to transparently compress something. If I can hear the compressor acting, on an individual instrument, it's probably what I would describe as being over-compressed. That's my 2 cents on that. Anything else that I've missed? I don't think I saw any other questions from anybody. Thanks for hanging out in the chat, everybody who's hanging out. Ooh, look, I see Nick the Newbie in the chat. My boy. Don't forget, you can hang out with Dwelling of Duels crew all the time in our Discord server. You can hit us up on Patreon. We've got a Patreon going where we pay for the banner artists for each month. That's at patreon.com/dwellingofduels. Currently, the month's theme for Dwelling of Duels is vocals. So songs with vocals is the theme. Like your submission has to have vocals in it in some way, which is obviously why we've done a whole... I just taught you how to do some mixing with vocals and stuff like that. If anybody has any extra questions or wants some opinions, you know, I'm in the Discord. Catajune, you can find me in there. Hang out. Yeah, if you back our Patreon at least $3 a month. Well, actually, if you back it at any level, you get to see next month's theme early before anybody else. If you back it at $3 or more, you get to hang out in our exclusive Discord channel in the Discord server. And you get to support Dwelling of Duels and all the stuff we do, which is really awesome. And you know, I thank everybody out there who does support from the bottom of my heart. If you are a Twitch Prime, if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can sub to this channel that you're watching this on with Twitch Prime. Twitch Prime sub is really awesome. If you're an actual sub, like subscriber, you know, we love you. Thanks so much for doing that too. And I think that's all my plugs for now. I think that's it. Yeah, thanks so much everybody for hanging out. This has been Dwelling of Duels, and we'll catch you later. I'm excited to see everybody's... Oops, turn that down. I'm excited to hear everybody's submissions for Vocal Month. I'm very excited for it all. And until next time, this is Dwelling of Duels.